Very good. Hello, everybody. A real pleasure being here with you today. I am Lorena Puica, CEO at SID, the creators of the Life Quality Index. The LQI is a proprietary methodology recognized as the gold standard for the well-being and prevention industry. It is backed by a pipeline of over 1 million research papers. And even more importantly, it actually works. It works for every organization and it works for every employee, irrespective of their background, age, ethnicity, income. Everyone is equal to us. So for today, I have two outstanding guests. And as usual, we are bridging the two sides of a specific topic or challenge that we're taking on. Number one, the scientific academic perspective, and number two, the hands-on practitioner perspective, the professional hands-on perspective. For that, today I have here Lynn Leadley, SVP of Learning and Development at PAX 8 in the US. And I'll invite Lynn in a second to introduce herself. And we have Dr. Carlo Pugnetti, lecturer at Zurich University of Applied Sciences in Switzerland. So on that note, Lynn, may I invite you to introduce yourselves to our guests?
Thank you, Lorena. Happy to be here. My name's Lynn Leadley. I am in Denver, Colorado. It's sunny today in the Rocky Mountains. I work for PAX 8, which is a cloud software and services distributor. We've got over 1,200 employees and we're global now. We're a fast-growing company. And I lead the global learning and development teams, which is made up of trainers. We onboard all new hires. We have career development and leadership development programs. And then I also have a learning experience design team. So that's me.
Thank you, Lynn. Carlo, over to you.
Thank you, Lorena. Great to be on board also for this webinar. Great to join the webinar with Lynn. Carlo Pugnetti is my name. I teach at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences. I come from a fairly long experience in business. I was the CEO of a company within the Allianz Group. I work within Allianz Group in Munich. So I've seen how large organizations do career development. I've seen how it happens, in my personal case. So I think I can bridge a little bit the gap between academia and practical experience, practical concerns. But switching to academia, because of this experience, I teach leadership in both the master's and the bachelor programs here in Zurich. And we've run a study on goal setting, what the goals of young people are as they enter careers. And the expectations are, of course, interesting and significant for our webinar. And I am looking forward to discussing in more detail during the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. And it's great to see. I find it fascinating always to combine what we have researched and proven to be true, at least for the hundreds or thousands of people that are part of the research study, versus what we end up doing day to day in organizations. In today's very intriguing world, I think career development has never been as important as it is now. We have challenges with the Great Resignation. Initially, that was thought that is a US problem. It turns out that it's a us problem. In that context, more and more organizations want to think through ways in which they can not only attract the right talent, also retain that talent for a little bit longer than a year, which now the tenure of millennials and zillennials is in the 1 year range. So what we'll be tackling today is the perspective of career development, both from the organization as well as from the individual perspective. And how can we bring these two together in a way in which we really design a win-win-win. Win for the individual, win for the organization, but also win for society, win for the people that touch that organization and that individual. Because if the individual feels empowered to grow and feels they are in the right place with the right organization at the right time in their career, then it's a smooth and quite phenomenal journey of growth. If that's not the case, more and more people start to feel stuck. And I think that's what we're seeing also with the mental health crisis. People find it more challenging to find their way, both in their jobs as well as in their lives. So on tackling this clearly very, very complex topic, let's try to simplify it and see if we can leave our guests, our audience, with some tangible insights and some inspiration as to how they could maybe see it a little bit differently, and also take some actions that supports employees both in the short and in the long term. So I'm going to kick off with ground zero question in terms of what you see as being people's expectations, career expectations in general, when they leave university. So in the earliest days possible of their career, what do you see their expectations being? And from an organizational perspective, how do you see your role in discovering those expectations and nurturing them? Carlo, may I start with you with the academic perspective, because this is a bit closer to the university years, and then Lynn, it'd be great to dive into the hands-on perspective. Carlo, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Lorena. So we ran a study, and so I think rather than to talk about individual examples, I think we can set the stage with this broader study that we ran of students in our university. So of course, take it with a grain of salt, because we're looking at students in Switzerland with different backgrounds, but fundamentally in Zurich, and their goals, independently of career in and of itself. We asked, well, what are the things that you're interested in achieving in your life? What are the things you're pursuing? And I think partly because of COVID, we had a lot of responses that focused on health, right? And so part of it was physical health, part of it was mental health. So that was actually a bigger component than we had anticipated. But again, it's got some, some history and some reasons. But then the other topics, the other big topics were around ability and self-fulfillment. So it was about developing their own skill set, about achieving something, but not necessarily in the way that perhaps we used to think about it. I used to think about it when I was in university in terms of leading an organization, having a big title, having a big salary, but much more in terms of developing their own skill set, and becoming partly better human beings, but also partly more technically proficient and effective people in organizations, workers in organizations, colleagues in organizations. So this this drive for, and this desire for self-development. Now, if I can make a bridge to to the history of career development, this has, I think, something to do with the way in which these people have seen careers develop, right? So this relationship that we used to have of perhaps in some cases too long, but lifelong, ideally employment, that in some countries in Europe is still, very much a goal. That basically broke, and these young people, these new people joining the workforce, becoming colleagues, do not have that expectation, and so that places a much greater burden on them to develop their own skill and remain marketable, right? Because they cannot necessarily bank on the loyalty of the company to carry them through lean times. And I think this impacts career development. So they are coming at this career, at their career with the filter of, I have to stay current, I have to stay marketable, I have to continue to deliver value, and I have to develop myself in ways that are interesting to me, because I need to be prepared, in the worst case, for switching careers quickly, without needing to, without wanting to. And then, of course, this leads to the other side of the medal. Well, if I'm now skilled and marketable, well, I'm going to go look for the next job if my company is not developing me quickly enough.
Those are the same things we're hearing, Carlo, when we interview candidates for positions. There's a lot more questions around career development, personal growth, and especially with COVID, asking about how they can stay connected with other employees. That's really important, a sense of purpose. At Pax8, we're a young company in that we've only been around 10 years, but also 80% of our employees are 39 and below. So they're early career employees, and they are looking for that personal and professional development. And as I was thinking about Daniel Pink's talk on TED Talk, where he talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And that's what people are looking for, and that's what will allow people to stay. And it's not necessarily just going up the ladder. It is staying sharp with your skills and getting certifications and staying up with technology.
Thank you both. So what I'm synthesizing from there, number one, is that self-development has become a much bigger topic for people just leaving university. The days of a lifelong job are long over, and the younger generations are really recognizing that and taking smart action to both develop themselves, but also build a tangible, pragmatic set of skills that they can employ in the early days as well as their career progresses. From the hands-on perspective, Lynn, thank you for sharing that, especially in those early days, to understand what are those drivers that empower them to build those skill sets are a lot less straightforward than what we thought. There isn't a rule book. This is what you do. These are the 3 things you do with your younger employees. And I think that's where the magic and the art of the HR professional of tomorrow is, to really craft a new way of looking and supporting the younger generations.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. In terms of bringing it more to today's world, so a set of employees, they come in, the younger generations come in, let's assume the best, that they have been empowered with the right guidance, tools, and mentorship to learn the right skill sets. How would you address, how do you look at balancing the needs of what's required today from their job, doing a great job now, and as the Japanese concept of Kaizen, kind of make those micro improvements every single day, which is great. However, a lot of people, especially in those early career years, start to think already, where am I going? What is that? What am I aiming for? And of course, some people might not want to go for the big C-suite job, but how do you balance that? First, from a hands-on HR professional perspective, and then Carlo, if there is any research bridging those two worlds, the today and tomorrow. Over to you, Lynn.
I think it's really important for managers and employees to be able to have that discussion as far as, where do you want to go in your career? What brings you joy? What is your passion? And try to uncover what are those motivated gifts that each of us have, to really, number one, understand whether you're happy in your current job and you've got the right skills and it's the right fit. But then what is the next step? Are you an aspiring leader? Do you think you want to go into management? Here's some offerings there to determine whether that's a good path for you. And the manager also needs to be educated on what are all the other career paths and other ways that a person can go, because I think there's this misconception that the only way to go up is through management. And as we know, not everybody makes a good manager or wants to be a manager, and they don't necessarily, they shouldn't be. So the career development team on my team gets involved with those discussions, and it really helps to have this other expert facilitate the discussion between the employee and the manager. We use Korn Ferry core competencies. So there's 38 core competencies. We've mapped every single role in the company. And so there's a discussion between the manager and the employee about how the employee maps to the top 12 competencies for their role. And sometimes there's gaps, and they talk about what the gaps are and why that might be the case and what are the plans to help fill those gaps. But again, it's up to the employee to say, okay, I'm going to pick decision making and self-awareness as two competencies I really want to work on. And we put together a career action plan for them, but it's really up to, they have the agency and the accountability to really follow through with that and try to drive and improve those areas and those skills. And then that helps them see where they can go from there. So that's just one example of something we do to help.
Thank you, Lynn. And before I hand over to Carlo, one thing that you touched on is that sense of agency. I think specifically at the dawn of all of the mental health issues and the younger generations that I find feel a bit shyer than at least my generation, which is not that long ago, or maybe a different industry. It's like what things can an organization do to really clearly and transparently communicate that responsibility is in your hands. You need to see yourself differently and take a little bit of charge, take action for what is important to you. And the context and the organization will support you to get there. However, you as an individual need to take the first step forward.
Right. I think, well, technology has helped us in that we use a platform called Lattice, and it prompts with questions for your weekly one-on-one with your manager. So that's one way where managers can ask the right questions. It also prompts the employee to say, what are the roadblocks you're having, or what are some things you need from your manager, whether it's time. Sometimes time ends up being the thing that people say, I don't have enough time to learn, to develop, to go to a webinar, to read articles because I just feel so busy. So then that prompts the discussion of, well, what's on your plate and how can I help? But at the end of the day, we really, there needs to be the psychological safety between the manager and the employee to be able to bring something forward to say, I need more time to do this. But I would say that's just making sure employees feel they have a voice. And so it's kind of a 50-50 two-way street as far as making sure that employee feels comfortable that they have the agency and they can bring up any concerns they have about doing their own learning. And there's a lot of social and peer learning that happens right outside of my organization. It's not just classes and the LMS and self-paced learning. There's a lot that they can learn from their peers.
Thank you, Lynn.
Sure. If I may follow up before I come back to the academic view, how do you see this, this interaction, the give and take between manager and employees in terms of topic? Is the career development, skill development aligned, or do you see companies and employees pursuing different targets, different ways forward?
Because we're growing so fast and hiring so much, that's been very helpful. You have more ability to move people between departments if somebody's not a right fit. We have this saying at Pax8, write your own job description. So if you see a gap and you see something where some work's not being done and you have some really good ideas, you can come forward and do that. So I do think that helps. I've been at Pax8 for 3 years. I've been at other companies where people feel really stuck because if anything, they're not hiring at all. And you don't have as much mobility or options available to you. And again, I think that's the employee's job to really look deep and determine, am I happy? Am I fulfilled where I am? And does it make sense to maybe go outside if this company is not moving in the direction I need?
Yeah, and building on that a little bit, I think that's from the from the student's perspective entering the workforce. This ability to influence the process, the individual attention rather than being a number is an incredible motivator. And of course, as soon as they develop the expectation that somebody develops their careers for them, their career is done, right? So they need to continue to take ownership of where they're going. Now I can tell you they're quite motivated to do so. They have seen that their way forward is to push for your own development. And I think the career development, the picture that we have, of either becoming a technical specialist or a manager or developing in other ways, there's a thread that links all of these development. That is the personal freedom. The more senior you are in an organization, the more you're able to fundamentally define your agenda. In some ways, in very tangible ways. Some ways, just control of your calendar, right? The appointments that you set on your calendar are yours rather than your boss's or somebody else. So there's very, very tangible little things that make your life a lot better. And I think this requires an organization that gives that space, gives the space and the trust that you will do what's right for the organization. And I love this slogan, this statement of write your own job description, right? Because that gives you the flexibility to grow at your own pace in the things that are interesting to you. The challenge is to make it match with what the organization wants, but it gives you the freedom. And this freedom and this welcoming environment for your own decision making, for your own freedom, for your own flexibility, takes many aspects. And one of them is career development, but it has to do something with supporting your well-being, right, your life quality in other ways. And so career development is one of the pillars, of course, that's interesting in a company, but the company needs to treat you, and you need to see the company treating you as a human being with all sorts of needs and life stages and interests and developments and so on. And then of course you have to, as an employee, pay this trust back, right? You have to pay this trust back with the willingness to, the ability, the willingness to do things that perhaps may not be your first choice, but are in fact what the company needs at that particular time to solve a problem that they may have. But it's a journey based on trust that is multi-dimensional and starts from being recognized as a human being, as a person, and recognizing the people within the company as, not as, management layers, but also as people, and grows from there.
Thank you, Carlo.
Absolutely.
Some pretty solid topics there. The journey, I like what you said, the journey based on trust. And I think that is the theme of definitely this decade. Building the trust from the organization out towards your employees, empowering them, and basically validating that by reciprocity. Because if you create the culture of trust and that is not reciprocated, then that's a much clear evaluation process rather than the performance reviews that are now starting to go obsolete as well. So thank you, Carlo, for that. Very good. We've gone through 2 of my 4 questions and we are 7 minutes away from finishing. So I think we need to whiz through it. So the third one, which you've touched on it to a certain degree, is how do you see that shared responsibility? How much is the responsibility of the organization to create the right environment, to empower with the right tools, and how much is the responsibility of the individual to have that agency, Lynn, that you touched about, to really take ownership, to write your own job spec, which I think it's brilliant. It's definitely the word of the day now, the phrase of the day. So how do you see that shared responsibility, and where do you think the balance needs to lie?
Well, I think the organization first has to provide the environment, the investment, to support the employees in what they want to do with their career growth. So culture obviously is very important. That's a complex, layered thing, but I think having a positive culture, transparent communications all the way from the top across an organization, collaboration, like we onboard employees every week. Like I was just looking at the stats, we hired 40 to 50 people every month this year, just in the US. So we are like hiring like crazy, and we give a we do a survey, and of course they say this is the best onboarding experience I've ever had. This organization is so fun. The all hands monthly meeting where all the new hires are introduced and all the promotions are announced makes it feel like an open, supportive environment. And so that's number one, making somebody feel really welcome when they first start. And then this feeling of total collaboration. Everybody's here to help. There aren't any real boundaries like they used to be on job, as far as, yes, we have roles and jobs, but I think there is this very general sense of wanting to help others and bringing others up. And then just having investment, we give $1,500 per employee for any kind of certification program or training they want to do every year. We talk about our mobility rates, which is like 40%, which means 40% of people every year move up or over in a different role. So you need to make it clear that that's really important to us, not just a bunch of talking points, and then make sure they're aware of what's available from either, like I said, my career development team, which can help you from a coaching standpoint and point you in the right direction, but then also what's available from an employee engagement resource group. We have health and wellness, the environmental group, the women's leaders group, things like that, to really get engaged and meet other people from other departments. And so I feel like we put a lot of things on a platter. Then yes, it's up to you to determine and decide what you want to do with all of that. But I think it starts with the organization. Absolutely.
Thank you, Lynn. Carlo, what is your view?
I agree with everything that Lynn said. I think people need to come prepared to contribute, but then the environment needs to be there. The one challenge that I see is that it's easy to be this flexible and open and accommodating and friendly when the business goes well. And the real acid test comes when you're now in a situation where you have to take some tough decisions because the business environment has changed. And the minute you then go back to, it's a McKinsey project and you cut 20% of the workforce and you just do it top down in ways that are, it could be correct, but it's not culturally aligned. You now destroy all the trust that you worked 20 years to create. And so I completely agree with everything you say, Lynn. And the challenge is always when the wind starts blowing and gets cold and it's winter and it's dark.
Right. Absolutely. And it says a lot about a company on what they end up cutting. If they end up cutting the whole learning and development team, that's a very strong message compared to if that's a very important pillar within the company, you'd hope at least some of that would be saved to send that message, and being very judicious about, you do have to cut, but what does that look like across the board?
Thank you both. I'll add my view here because I have a pretty strong one when it comes to this. I think, especially in this ever-changing environment where the speed of change is unseen before, it's absolutely phenomenal how much change we see across all businesses. Clearly, Carlo, thank you for bringing in that as a risk, as a potential risk to the business. And also the employer perspective, Lynn, I completely agree. The context and the culture needs to be there. So I do see that the self-agency point that you touched on earlier is absolutely paramount. I think really individuals, because it's very hard to try to infer or guess what is happening, especially if you have a large group of employees. I'm thinking of my friends in the entrepreneurship space where they have employees everywhere around the world, as we do. And there, you really need to rely for each to be able to share also a bit more of their context, because culture in a remote environment is much more challenging to create. So having the individual to feel empowered and to have that sense of self-agency, to take action and say, hey, this is important to me, this is what I would like it to be, and this is what I want to do. I think it's going to become more and more important going forward. And having the right audience to go to in the organization to know, hey, do you want to write your own job spec? This is who you go to.
Right.
You want to redesign your role? This is who you go to. I think that's going to become more and more important going forward, and to have that kind of distributed system where the roles are less relevant than the actual work that gets done and how that gets distributed across teams in multiple geographies. So exciting times coming. Now for the final one, where we need to be short and sweet. How would you link this back to retention, back to an organization's view as to retention? Because we think of retention as like, great, we got them in, amazing onboarding, they all feel great and empowered. However, there is an external context that employees will touch on, and at some point, it might be just easier to move on rather than to move up. What do you see the link of that to retention, and what do you think organizations can do about that?
Well, we do exit interviews like probably every other company when somebody leaves, but that's a little too late. So we also do stay interviews, which I think is becoming more popular. So our HR business partners will go to each department and ask a series of questions. We have 10 questions that we ask. And it's one-on-one, it's confidential. They summarize the results and then meet with the leader of that department to talk about what are the general sentiments, where are some areas for improvement. So number one, that helps to give that insight. We also do pulse surveys, so we can see right away if somebody's really feeling like the work-life balance is not working for them. If people are suffering from burnout, too much change, like you mentioned. So there are ways to try to get some leading indicators about how people are feeling before it gets just, too detrimental and it's too late to correct it. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think those are some ways to know if somebody's considering leaving, and there's some things you can do up front to help with that. But I think for my department, it's important that we make sure we market ourselves a little bit better. I think there are some people that don't know about our mentorship program and our shadowing program to be able to shadow another department to see if you're interested in another role. So that would be something that I would say learning and development organizations are not good at marketing themselves and making sure all employees are aware of what we can offer them.
Thank you, Lynn. Carlo, any insights from an academic perspective or from your hands-on experience?
Yeah, two of them, I think, and I'll make it very brief. The first one is that I agree with Lynn. It's part of this environment that we need to create, and career development is part of this fundamental need that we have as human beings to grow, right? And sometimes our growth is career-wise in terms of skill set and network and foreign experience and all these kind of things, and sometimes it's personal, right? So we have to, as companies, I think we have to understand this complexity and provide the right environment and support this kind of environment. Of course, if all of the efforts are in family, well, okay, I mean that's understandable, but that has an impact, of course, on your career progression at some point in time. But so we have to provide this basis of understanding and accepting human beings as human beings. The second one, as I would like to point out that not all turnover is bad, right? It's how it happens that's important. So if an employee is very happy, right, and decides for their own reasons, to have a better impact on societal issues, or to learn a particular skill, or as a way to be in a different country, or whatever it is, to go someplace else, but is left with a very good impression of the company, right? You have now gained an advocate, right? You now have a friend, a colleague, an advocate in some other parts of the industry who may come back even, right, after they develop some skills, or in any case can give you interesting information and support and insight someplace else in the industry. And consulting companies do this very, very well, right? So the alumni network of consulting company and business schools do this very, very well. And I think this is a great resource for companies. So it's not the fact that people leave the company, is if they leave mad, right? That is really important. And so career development can happen outside the boundaries of an organization. as long as this mutual understanding is there. And so I agree with you, Lynn. Exit interviews is too late, and people don't tell you why they leave, right? I mean, by that time they have closed that chapter of their life. But if they leave happy with the experience that they've had, you have gained a humongous amount of traction, a humongous amount of goodwill in other parts of the industry.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you both, Lynn and Carlo. I think we've tackled quite a few issues. I have a few key takeaways for our audience. Number one, seeing a lot more focus in the millennial and zillennial population on self-development, and then clarity as to what pragmatic skills are to be built in the first few years on the job. Self-agency, that is becoming a lot more important, especially when it comes to career development and taking charge in an ever-changing skills world. Ownership of your own path, write your own job spec phrase. I think that's really paramount, and it's going to become more important as organizations become more dynamic. And then designing an end-to-end journey based on trust and based on a recognition that both individuals on both sides of the conversations are human beings, and with the intention to contribute something both to their colleagues and to their environment. And last, in terms of retention is vital, but not all retention is good or all retention is bad. So really understanding what and discerning between that, and ensuring that at that exit point, there is a good vibe and there is a good sense of relationship still, albeit it's the end of one phase of that relationship and then it continues in another form, be that an alumni network or be that an less structured relationship. So on that note, I want to thank you for today. I think we've tackled quite a few of the topics in the career development space, and I'm sure there's a lot more we could do. Appreciate your contributions, and I look forward to the next time.